A very good morning, respected chair and my friends. I'm really thankful to Dr. Andrews and Dr. Raj for inviting me, rather giving me this opportunity to speak here. This is my first venture with the Anglo-Indians, and I hope this connection will continue, and I'll try to research more and more aspects, particularly in the sporting arena, where I've worked in my thesis, in my PhD thesis. Today I'm going to speak on genealogy of sporting culture through a study of Anglo-Indian institutions of Asansol. In 1911 census, the government of Lord Hardinge officially termed those of mixed blood children born of European fathers and Indian mothers and children born of their offspring as Anglo-Indians. Government of India Act of 1919 described Anglo-Indians as, I quote, every person being a British subject and resident in British India of A, European descent in the male line, B, mixed Asiatic descent. However, one cannot deny the fact that they were more Anglo than Indian. Their mother tongue was English and was their religious upbringing as were their customs and traditions. But when they settled in a particular local hub, they tried to adopt some culture. Such was the case of Anglo-Indians in Asansol. In sports, the British offered Indians a means of developing themselves physically. Public schools started to breed a new form of masculinity attached to the figure of the sporting gentleman. Indeed, many among the British officials saw it as a part of their imperial duty to help the Indians to improve themselves physically as strong men. The most obvious place where British improvement met with ambitious young Indians was in the Anglo-Indian schools and colleges. Sports like football and cricket found place in the school curriculum as they were used as a model tool of governance. In a pioneering work on the contribution of Anglo-Indians to Indian sporting culture, Megan Mills pointed out that sports has always been an integral part of Anglo-Indian way of life. Particularly, the English medium schools run under the patronage of this community were always been a hub of nurturing the ideal of athleticism or competitive sports as a natural adjunct of education. Sporting activities like hockey, cricket, soccer, and others were the regular leisure practices of the youth, which find mention in the writings of the colony-born Anglo-Indians while reminiscing about their childhood in the railway colonies and other service enclaves. It was the Anglo-Indian women who acted as role models for the native women in the sporting arena of Bengal. The sporting attire introduced by the Anglo-Indian women were adopted by the natives. The government was always keen enough to introduce well-devised courses of physical education in the province. But due to the financial stringency, they were not permitted to undertake schemes of physical education in educational institutions. Yet, they arranged for physical training grants to schools by utilizing the meager grants available from the provincial revenues. An outstanding feature of the early decades of 20th century was the growth of public opinion in favor of physical education. The real drive for physical education as an educational ideal in Bengal was, however, noticed during the 1920s, when we have evidence of numerous ventures adopted on the part of the government to promote physical culture, both among teachers as well as students. In May 1927, the Senate of the University of Calcutta adopted a resolution that appealed to the government of Bengal to formulate a scheme for extending facilities for military training to college students. Earlier, the Senate had appointed a physical education committee who recommended that physical training for at least 1 year at the rate of 3 days a week during the school terms at any period of school life should be made obligatory for every student. In 1935, the Ministry of Education of the Government of Bengal published a resolution to reorganize the existing education system and conditions of education in Bengal. It was clearly mentioned that it was the responsibility of the school to implement games and physical exercises since, I quote, there are many things which are best done corporately and which the school can organize better than the individual parent, unquote. Apart from organized exercise and games, the expansion of Scout movement was also emphasized with the aim of game for every boy and girl and every boy and girl in a game. In this period, number of important circulars were issued by physical director giving directions and suggestions for the organization and the supervision of games and athletics and connected matters. They contemplated the gradual diminution of the importance of the old-fashioned drill and of an increased attention to indigenous exercise, swimming, games, and other activities likely to have a definite appeal to the interests of the students. In 1932, a physical training center was set up by the government. It was contemplated that the graduates trained in this center might combine the duties of academic teaching and of physical training in schools. In 1912, the government of India held an important conference in Shimla on the education of domiciled community. The education of the Europeans and Anglo-Indians and Anglo-Indian community came up as a matter of great social and political importance in this conference. In the Bengal presidency, there were on 31st March 1917, 79 organized institutions for the education of Europeans and Anglo-Indians. These institutions included some special schools, like a night school for the Bengal-Nagpur Railway European and Anglo-Indian apprentices at Kharagpur. With the need of the hour, these schools also realized the significance of physical culture among the school boys and girls and introduced sporting activities in the curriculum. Now, these are some of the sporting activities in the public schools. One important agency for spreading the public school ethos was the London Missionary Society. In some of these schools, games were compulsory except for the boys who used to walk long distance to attend the school. A number of schools had physical directors trained at YMCA College of Physical Education at Madras. These trained directors brought a fresh and vigorous atmosphere and a new keenness about sports in the schools where they served. The spirit was also expressed in the narratives by the students about the general sporting activities of the schools, which were regularly published in the annual school journals. The European Schools Athletic Association, for example, the Shiksha Sangho, North Point Annual, etc., were the journals where these things were published. Now, the European Schools Athletic Association was revived in 1937-38 and organized regular school tournaments in which all kinds of sports like cricket, football, hockey, swimming, boxing, and cross-country races were competed for. 3 secondary schools and 10 primary schools had scout troops against 2 secondary schools and 9 primary schools in Bengal in 1941. Government paid rupees 1,200 as scout grants and rupees 1,400 for girls' guide troops in 9 secondary schools and 10 primary schools. Now, these are some of the scouts' activities which were performed at that point of time. Moreover, the annual sports became a major event in the annual routine of the schools. There were scattered newspaper reports which indicate the enthusiasm created by the sports day in a particular school. The notable events of Anglo-Indian school sports of 1941 included high jump, long jump, potato race, sack race, and obstacle race, as well as relay race. Often plenty of records were broken in the school sports meet. Now, there are n number of examples for that. Let me skip those. A number of younger boys showed great promise and were considered as prodigy for the forthcoming years in the sporting arena. These sporting competitions of the schools became so important and talk of the town that they were regularly published as well as publicized in the contemporary newspapers. St. Joseph's and St. James annexed the senior and junior league championships easily at the annual athletic sports of the Anglo-Indian Schools Athletic Association held on the Dalhousie Rangers ground. Now, these are some of the pictures of athletic sports in the schools at that point of time. Now, that particular picture is really very interesting. There were often representative matches between the students of different communities in such an annual cricket encounter in Eden Gardens, Calcutta, between the Bengali students and the Anglo-Indian students, the former own. It was a repetition of the same tradition of the last 3 years. After winning the toss, the Anglo-Indians decided to bat. From the beginning, they suffered ill fate and they lost the match to the Bengalis. Now, these are some of the inter-community friendly matches which were conducted at that point of time. Next slide also. Now, this is a thing which you were mentioning in your keynote address. That was a very small picture, and I have this picture where you can find that Anglo-Indian girls and Indian natives, they were playing at par in the drills and games. Apart from Calcutta, Kharagpur was another hub of the Anglo-Indians. The new special schools like Fendal Home, a non-governmental reformatory school, was established for the girls. Anglo-Indian students turned there in numbers. These schools, irrespective of gender difference, concentrated on the physical culture of their pupils. Physical education classes of the Young Women's Christian Association were established in these institutions. Now, here you can see some of the events for Anglo-Indian girls, which were regularly organized. The colonizers came to Asansol, which was transformed into a railway, steel, and coal hub of Bengal. They came here with polo sticks and masculine ideas, thus developing a culture of their own. Thanks to the education policy of the colonial masters, that English was impregnated into the native minds. Thus, Bengal witnessed spread of British-style schools like rest of India. It is a clouded fact that up to and beyond independence, English was diffused through this country, not officially by the Raj, but unofficially by the Anglo-Indians. Asansol also witnessed the establishment of St. Patrick's boarding school, railway school, St. Vincent's, as well as Loreto. Apart from imparting education, these institutions also concentrated on imparting physical education to the students as an initiative of disciplining the body. This public school ethos was also on occasions replicated in the playing fields of Eastern India. Now, these are some of the sporting activities which took place in Asansol, though particularly this kind of pictures are very scarce. Still, I have got that picture of St. Patrick's, and this is of Loreto. Like the tradition in the rest of Bengal, in Asansol too, sports was introduced to foster the idea of physical development of the students, to hold out the ideal of a sound mind in a sound body before the students, to create a feeling of brotherhood among them. The natural replication of this was the annual sporting events of the schools. The annual sports of the Loreto Convent, Asansol, featured varied events and a very keen spirit was shown. The Loreto Prize, awarded by Mother Superior of the girls, showing the best sporting spirit throughout the year, was won by Andre Connolly in 1941. Interestingly enough, the senior school was divided into 3 teams: Army, Navy, and Air Force, and they competed for the Challenge Cup. Among them, Air Force emerged as winners. 3 records were broken and 1 equaled at the annual sports meeting of St. Patrick's High School, Asansol. The nature of competition was very keen, and the usual high standard of athleticism was maintained. The St. Vincent School's annual athletic sports were always held with a great success. In the event of 1948, F. Lidon was the best man and won 5 events. Interestingly, J. Singh of Asansol won the open 2-mile cycle race. All other participants were, however, Anglo-Indians or Europeans, excepting J. Singh. Apart from annual sporting events in schools, inter-school competitions were also organized, which were participated by the local students with full vigor and zeal. In the first annual meeting of the European school sports at Asansol in 1927, promoted by the Christian Brothers School Athletic Association, there were no fewer than 120 competitors representing 5 Christian brother institutions in Bengal and Bihar. The 5 institutions that sent down athletes were St. Joseph's and Male Orphanage from Calcutta, St. Patrick's and St. Vincent's from Asansol, and St. Michael's from Patna. Students from Loreto College, Asansol, traveled all the way to Calcutta for participating in the intra-Loreto sports meet organized by Loreto schools, in which students from Loreto across Bengal participated. Newspapers came out with the report that Coalfield became interested in sports. Numerous football matches and tournaments were being organized. The local crowd were enthusiastic about the matches. Schools, especially Anglo-Indian institutions, came up with lots of tournaments and exhibition football matches. Now, this is St. Patrick's School's winner of Searsole Football Association Cup. Here they defeated the Asansol A team, a native team from Asansol. Thus, they were also being a part of the other tournaments which were being played in Asansol at that point of time. Finally, with the independence of India in 1947, many of the Anglo-Indians, most of whom were employed in the railroads and other government services, chose to emigrate. Dorothy McMenamin argued that the removal of employment privileges which had existed under the British forced them to examine their own ambivalent position and raised concern for their future prospects in the eve of communal rivalry between Hindus and Muslims, as they realized that these 2 communities will rise in power in the respective newly built nations. However, some of them didn't leave the country due to a sense of endearment they had developed with their birthplace, and eventually bestowed a constitutional safeguard. In the report of the progress of education in West Bengal, published right after independence in 1951, it was mentioned that 3 European schools closed down for lack of pupils. The then fixed proportion of 25% of Indians getting the chance to be admitted in these schools were under consideration by the government. So, with the passage of time, a process of assimilation of different races and culture were inadvertent in these schools, and the representation of European and Anglo-Indian students in these schools continued to decline, and as such, they became minority in their own institutions. But their passion for sporting activities never ceased to exist, and they excelled in many branches of sports. The schools, by the turn of the schools run by the community also were able to sustain their pursuit for promoting sports as ideals of self-control and discipline. In the words of Mills, I quote, a visit even today to an Anglo-Indian school in any part of India will represent immediate evidence of sport. Now, these are the pictures of modern day sports which are held in Asansol missionary schools. Thank you.